Welcome to the Rainmaker Multiplier on Demand, a podcast for leading financial professionals, or rainmakers, and their teams that offer support for securing a successful future. From marketing help to staffing structure, listen and subscribe for actionable insights from advisors and skilled professionals alike.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another coffee break with C2P. My guest today needs no introduction, though of course I will introduce him. So joining me today is Matt Seitz. I think everyone knows who Matt is, but just give him a few of his accolades and kudos. So Matt is, of course, our Chief Marketing Officer here at C2P. He also is the CMO and Head of Business Development at JL Smith, though those roles will be combining over time, right, Matt? In his roles, he has streamlined marketing sales funnels, spearheaded the digital growth of both companies. Matt has made a name for himself as an author, speaker, and won numerous now industry awards for his contribution to the marketing space, specifically for financial services. So, Matt, thanks so much for joining us. I will try not to roast you too hard today, even though that is, as you know, one of my favorite things to do.
Thank you very much, Kalem. Yes, I was a little nervous when I found out you were the host today.
I'll play it mostly straight today. So let's get into our topic. It's a good one. Obviously one that's very relevant. I know you're going to share some kind of timely tips and stuff that just relate to content we've recently pushed out. So again, today's topic: improving your webinar process from touch point to follow up. So let's start with an easy one, Matt. We'll tee you up with thinking back over your career, over that 15 years that you've had, what have been your most effective webinars? What made it stand out in terms of flowing smoothly, generating strong engagement? Kind of what are those things that you look back on and say these were the most effective for us?
Yeah, thanks, Kim. And I know, all jokes aside too, this is a hot topic that we get a lot of questions on through Mentor Connect, through coaching calls, through our events at C2P and Prosperity. So it is a hot topic. I know we've got content coming out about this a lot, and things are always changing, but there are some things that are kind of the best practices, or the tips that everyone should be keeping in mind when they're moving forward, especially on something like today's topic, webinars. And the first one might seem like a no-brainer with any presentation, whether it's a webinar, workshop, whatever, but preparedness. Just being ready, and especially on a webinar, it can be more, and some of you this might really hit home with you. It can be harder to present in a webinar format than it is up on stage in front of 100 people. Some people are terrified to get up on stage. Hey, I don't want to do that. But you get in a webinar format, and especially if it's not one like the format here where we can see everybody, but you get no audience reaction. You're trying to tell a joke, and you don't know if it landed because you can't see anyone on the other end. Like, I personally would much rather be on stage than a webinar, because you can feed off the audience. So you need to learn how to adapt and present differently in a webinar format. And so just being prepared, practicing, and even here with our team, I mean, I guess I'll volunteer myself and the rest of our marketing team too. If you are filming webinars, go ahead and record those and send them to us. We'll take a look at them, and as long as you're open to it, we will provide you that open and honest feedback, because we want to help you make those better and you as a better presenter. So please utilize that as a resource if you want us to take a look at that. As part of that, I mentioned engaging the audience early. Kalem and I are doing this. Kalem does a great job at that, of just calling out people's names as they're coming in, engaging people, telling jokes, telling stories as it's getting started to build a rapport as it's getting kicked off. Yes, that's still important even in a webinar format. And even if you don't have the names on screen, or you're showing everyone's faces like we have today, great to see everyone on here. Make it up. And I know it sounds silly, but make those names up. Hey, Joe, good to see you today. Hey, Kathy, glad to see you on another webinar. They don't know that. Use those names. It is engaging. Someone will be sitting there waiting because they're like, is he or she going to say my name next? And it is engaging. It will draw them in, and they'll be paying attention to that. The other one, this can be a hard one, keep the intro brief. Believe it or not, everyone is not there to hear about you and your company for 15 minutes. They are there to hear about the topic at hand. It doesn't mean you can't include any introduction, but keep that brief. There's plenty of time to explain your backstory in the sales process later on when they decide whether they want to work with you or not. Try to limit that at the beginning. In fact, anyone that's checked out our new women's presentation, kudos Maddie and Chelsea got that going. I love that when we're trying something a little different. It actually jumps right into a story. It actually doesn't start with the introduction. I love the innovation there, and I think there might be something to that with other webinars moving forward. And then finally, Caleb, I know I'm talking a lot, but I'm trying to cram in all these tips for everyone to be writing these down, and obviously can check out the podcast recording afterwards. Uh, Tell them what the process is. It's just like we say with the bucket plan. Put the visual out there, show that to them. Tell them up front, hey, this is part one of two. Part of this is selling and marketing is human psychology. People see the process, they want to follow along with the process. Similar to hearing a song. We've all done that. You hear a song, it cuts off. You want to finish the lyric. That's your brain saying, hey, I want to see this through. When you can tee that up at the beginning of a webinar to say, this is part one of two, today is part one where we're going to cover this topic at a high level. So we're going to cover why all money is not taxed the same, how to avoid hidden tax traps, leveraging your tax funnels to maximize your retirement. Part two is your complimentary consultation. How do those topics impact your scenario? And we want to make sure we address you. So make sure that after today's presentation, you're clicking the link to make sure that you book your call. In fact, we're going to drop that in the chat right now. So if you want to get started, you can book that now. You just added a call to action in your presentation in the first few minutes that you're going to start filling up your calendar. That's going to resonate much better than just, hey, go book a call. Make it part of the process.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. I guess I should have not introduced you then now. Or I could have made up a story. I would have been a better way to start this off if I
I'm sure you can make up a lot of stories about me by now, Cal.
It's actually my favorite thing to do. These were really helpful, though I don't see a ton of pen scratching somewhere. Is there one that maybe stands out to you is maybe the most helpful, best practice, tip, trick, whatever you want to call it, from your experience, just one that you would kind of key on the most?
Yeah, and actually, before I get into that, I am going to continue on your theme of the stories here because I think that stories are the engaging part. They make people, care more. And, one of my more fun Calem stories. So throwing it back at Calem, poking the fun back this time. One of our collegiums a handful of years ago, I was walking around and people kept throwing the little squish balls that we were handing out at our booth at me as we were walking by. I'm like, what's going on? They're like, I don't know. Calem told me to throw this at you. So have fun. That's a lesson that's not in here that everyone's got to remember. Have fun with what you're doing, and be able to tell those stories. But no, bringing it back to here, Calem, the one tip that I think is going to move the needle the most, just having a documented process for this. From start to finish of what is your lead flow in general for webinars specifically. In this case, it works the same with any other thing you're doing, whether it's a workshop, you're running ads for ebooks or guides, anything like that. But document that process before you start going and spending money on these lead generation efforts. Any of you right now could go and cut a check to any of our great partners, whether it's 8Digit, Afia, AcquireUp, any of these, and they're going to help deliver leads for you. But when you have an effective follow-up process that goes with that, so you're not just going to show up and throw a webinar and say, hey, 8 people booked on my calendar, that's fantastic. Well, if you had 80 people register, what are you doing with the other 72 that registered for that? You've already paid for those leads. Let's make sure that we get them into your process. So document that ahead of time so that you're proactive with that communication instead of reactive and figuring out, hey, who around the office can call for these, or hey, I got to set up email nurtures to be able to send here.
You started to mention some numbers, right? You started to mention like kind of that X number of people show up, X number of people book. When you look at performance, kind of shifting to almost the back end now of the webinar, when you're looking at like how did that webinar perform, or really any marketing campaign for that matter, what are those metrics you're looking at to kind of like, what are the most important to you? What are the most important to the team? What are the things people should really be keen on for, what constitutes a successful webinar?
Yeah. So with the perform is a lot of times it goes right back to the advisor of what is the goal of that presentation, or if they're doing a series of these. For us, we have different goals. Speaking specifically right now to the JL Smith side, the B2C, like many of you, it can depend on the one we're running. So if we are looking to, hey, fill the funnel, we need a lot of leads that we can drip on, have our team call on, we might want to run a Social Security webinar. We know that those tend to result in the highest number of registrations for a webinar versus conversion. We know over time from tracking our results that we might want to go the route of a taxes and retirement. And more recently, like over the past year, we see we call it the tax trilogy or the 7 steps one you might see in our C2P Central for more of a high net worth audience. And so knowing ahead of time what your goal is, obviously everyone wants leads, they want people on the calendar, but over time you might say, hey, I want to have more bets for my team. And then you might want to go the route of something like the Social Security. But Calem, in general, I'd say obviously starting with the most basic of registrations. Are we getting enough people in the door to know that the messaging is resonating with the audience that we're going after? I would say after that, making sure that you're keeping an eye on attendance rate. And this is a tricky one right now. We are seeing this at JL Smith, but really across the industry right now. Those are tending to dip. The attendance rates, I think some of this is webinar fatigue. Some of this is people like I'm sure a lot of you, I'll probably get some nodding heads here in a second, that just know right off the bat, I'm going to register, I'm going to wait for the replay, and I'm going to watch this sometime down the line, when I got time tonight or this weekend or whatever. So a lot of that is that's why it's also important to watch how many people are watching the replay after the fact to know that it's still resonating. But keeping an eye on attendance rate, the attendance rate is also why everything I mentioned earlier in the process and the follow-up to keep that message in front of them is so important. So even if that attendance rate is dipping, you're still getting engagement down the line. And then for us, Caleb, we're also measuring how many right fit calls are booked. And that's not necessarily, again, right on the webinar, but we actually track how many book on the webinar and then how many are booking in the follow-up after the fact. So either from our email nurtures or we utilize the Pellegrini team. I know we've talked about Gina and her team before, but how many calls are they booking for us in their follow-up calls? And then finally, conversions. Obviously, we all want new business from the marketing and business development activities we're doing. These, obviously, the team, our advisors are measuring those along the way. But for the effectiveness of the topics and the types of webinars that we're running, those you tend to look at it more of a quarterly basis because you're not seeing those, just the nature of the life cycle of a sale. You're not looking at those each week or each month. Those tend to be more of a quarterly metric that you can reflect back on and say, hey, is this webinar or this topic resonating?
Obviously, not everything always goes according to plan. Can you share maybe some examples of, things that maybe didn't turn out quite the way you expect? I mean, you can do all the preparation in the world. Stuff's going to happen at times. I know some of you are probably shaking your heads in this room. You're a little bit of seminar workshop warriors. I'm sure you've done in-person ones where things have gone awry. I mean, I'll never forget we showed up to do a dinner seminar and the restaurant lost water that day, so we had to do it on the patio outside, and it turned out to be one of the best one of the best seminars we ever did because you just everyone had to kind of adjust on the fly, right? Like, so restaurant, us, them, like it was actually ended up being one of our highest conversion ratios. But can you just share some things that maybe didn't turn out the way you had hoped, and then kind of what are some of those learning experiences you can take away from that?
Yeah, you'd think right now that that was planned, that my power went out
Yes.
during this webinar. That couldn't have been more timely, but believe it or not, we've had that happen before. That was actually one of the examples I was going to give. We had that happen on a C2P webinar. I think it might have been even earlier this year. And I think the important message with any of these, whether webinar or in person, is just being agile and still keeping the customer slash prospect in mind to make it a good experience. If we go into panic mode, they're going to sense that. So in a webinar format, the example I gave earlier, we had that go down and it was a webinar. Our team member here on the C2P side responded phenomenally, immediately jumped into action. He moved the webinar recording over to a private YouTube channel. So compliance was okay with that. and got an email out to all registrants, even those that weren't on the recording, to say, hey, we're so sorry we had this happen. Wanted to make sure we got you the replay right away. And our call to action for that, we were going to send something to them if they booked a call with us. He said, hey, because of our mistake in the power outage, we're going to send this to everyone. And here's the link to get your access. So even though things did not go right for us that day and it cut off mid-webinar, that one we were the host, so it completely ended it, not just me jumping on and off earlier there. Still made it a positive experience overall, despite what was going on there. And I know this is more focused on webinars, but Caleb, to the example you gave earlier, we had a scenario a couple years ago, and some of you that are on today might have had this happen before too. We ran, I don't know if it was in a FIA, Acquire Up, doesn't really matter, but an in-person workshop showed up and there were only 3 people in the audience. Very hard to be on your A game when you have a smaller audience like that. And Brian Bibbo, being Brian, I'll give him his flowers, even though he's not on with us today, walked in, turned a chair around, sat facing the audience, said, let's just make this a roundtable discussion. Asked me questions. It was almost like a mentor call like we do here with those 3. All 3 people booked and went through the process. He made it about them. He's like, I'm not going to stand up here and just talk for an hour at this topic. Why don't we just get right into addressing your scenarios now? And again, being agile and making the best out of a bad situation there.
While social security webinars bring the most leads, what webinars generate the highest level or percentage of right fit prospects? You know, you were talking about tracking those numbers. Do you kind of see that one converts more to that right fit call than others?
We definitely see the tax and retirement, kind of our staple one, still having the most conversions from that standpoint. And as I mentioned, the newer one, the 7 steps or tax trilogy, whatever you're calling it, your firm, we're seeing the more conversions from a more like high net worth, ultra high net worth audience. So maybe not as many conversions as the tax and retirement, but a little higher net worth on that side. Hopefully, too, we'll have the results. We've just started kind of running our women's presentations again, so we'll certainly keep everyone in the loop on what we see there. But we had a very positive response from running those. There's just not, with only a couple weeks in, we don't have all that data gathered and able to share yet.
How much time do you or should you allocate for a webinar? Are you generally running 45 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour? Like, what is there kind of a sweet spot in terms of that time range that you've found?
Yeah, and funny enough, Caleb, this goes back to similar what you and Gina were talking about as we jumped on and we're getting started today. The shorter, the better, but you want to be able to communicate your message in enough time. So I never want to truncate what you need to communicate, the effectiveness of that message to resonate with your audience. Because remember, it's not just communicating the content, it's building rapport with your audience as well. But I certainly just the way we are today, the whole reels and TikToks and everything, like shorter and shorter attention spans. Try and keep those shorter. If you can get it down to 30, I think that is ideal. But if you need more time, I understand that. Keep in mind too, the presentations we have in C2P Central there, those are templates that anyone can access. You are able to and allowed to adjust those down as you see fit of like, hey, I'm going to cut this content out. Be sure if you are changing any content to run that back by compliance before you run it, as we have it approved as is. But we want to put everything and anything you need in there. If you say, hey, I think I could take these sections out and present this, and it will help us cut it down and make that shorter, certainly might see more effectiveness there. And as we are developing, our new ones like the OBBB or the OB3 or whatever you're calling it, the newer one we have there, that one is designed at 30 minutes. So that one is a shorter one. But I would say the shorter you can keep it, the better. Just to make sure that you're keeping attention span. And losing attention span obviously is a real thing in a webinar. That's also why, going back to the tip early on, making sure that you work your calls to action in throughout the webinar. Don't have a 30, 45, 60-minute webinar and have your call to action to book a call with you in minute 59 of a 60-minute webinar. You're going to lose, even if they don't drop off, you might lose their attention span during that time. They're multitasking, they're checking email, they're doing whatever some of you are probably doing right now while I'm talking. Um, you're going to lose it. So if you can work that CTA into the beginning, work one into the middle, work one into the end, you're going to increase the likelihood that you're going to get those calls booked throughout the webinar.
Matt, if I can just jump in on something you just said there. If you kind of lock it into 30 minutes, it's great. And sometimes I see advisors want to answer every question that's submitted. I would actually challenge you and say, don't answer each of them, because it's a wonderful opportunity to say, Joe, you just answered a question. We're a little bit pressed for time, and I want to learn more about your situation. I'm going to give you a call afterwards. That person's going to take the call, right? Versus if you answered their call already, they're like, well, yeah, I don't want to talk to you, Joe. But if you kind of call that out, it's another technique, not only be respectful of time, but it's an in, because they're going to take your call because they specifically asked a question. So it's another tactic to, not only keep track of your time, but also open that door, which will obviously lead to more engagement or right fit call.
Yeah. Thanks, Carrie, because that's, it was a question I know we are going to get to later, and I don't know that we'll get there, Caleb, but it's worth mentioning now. That is the power of doing recorded webinars, because I'm believing the transparency there. Just say up front, hey, we're not going to be able to address questions individually today, but we still encourage you to drop them in the chat. We will make sure everyone gets an answer. So everyone's still get their answer, but let them know that's going to come after. Now you get 8 questions throughout. Your sales team or whoever is, it might be you, but whoever is calling on your behalf is armed with those questions that even if you have to leave a voicemail, make sure you mention that voicemail. I'm calling to answer your question. And it's going to increase the likelihood that you get a call back as well.
Couple more questions, but do you ever do lunch and learns or dinners for webinars? Maybe that's the kind of timing it up for that time of day, I guess.
I can start to answer that. The webinars, we try different times. We found the most effectiveness there kind of in that 6:30, kind of right after work time frame, trying them there. We've tried moving them up earlier in the day. I know some advisors, especially talking to like the group at 8Digit and Acquire Up. So Acquire Up, formerly White Glove, if those aren't familiar. And they said they have a lot of advisors that have success holding them kind of mid-morning to lunchtime. We just haven't seen it here. So just sharing that there are some that have seen those work. But for us, kind of having them in that, I'll say about 6 o'clock-ish time frame, give or take a half hours when we've seen the most effectiveness. And best day of the week, we tend to see Wednesday, Thursday. Same thing. We've tried different ones, and Wednesday and Thursday seem to resonate the most. We've tried Saturdays. Again, I know there's others that say, hey, I swear by doing them on Saturday morning. We haven't seen the results on our side doing them on a weekend.
Matt, across the board, is there any certain thing you find that there's a commonality that people are typically looking for when they go there? Are they just curious? Are they looking to maybe it'll be served something? Or is there an exact sort of common issue that you find is very prevalent when you're hosting these, where now probably you're going to focus more in that area? Does anything stick out?
It's a fair question. I would say the majority of the people registering for a webinar, because we'll get, depending on the webinar, I'll say on average we get between 60 and 80 registrants. It's just education. They're trying to gather information, and we know that. We've shared the data on there. People are doing more and more research before they want to make a decision on who they want to work with, because they're very educated before they've booked that right fit call or whatever the call is at your respective firm. So most of them are education based, and that's why we want to make sure that that's where the whole 2-step process comes in, because now you're saying we're going to educate you, but now let's go address your scenario. And I think that's why that is effective. But that's also why we see the trends. And the more and more you do these or any other lead generation efforts, again, it could be in person, could be guides and ebooks, but the more data you have, the more trends you'll see there. We pull these both on the JL Smith and the C2P side. Like, and my team can correct me if I'm wrong, which I frequently am, but I want to say it's like an average of 3.5 webinars that someone watches before they actually book with us. And it's like 5 ebooks. And sometimes it's the same ebook. They download it like 8 months later. And so the more education and thought leadership that we can provide, the more likely they are to call us, you, when they are ready to move forward. And so that's kind of the power of compounding on all of these things.
I asked that because there's two types of people looking for education, the serious and just the curious, and how we
Mhm.
separate those. The serious ones means you really have a live person who wants to take action and maybe has a sense of urgency in their life. The curious person just wants to always compare things. That's where we probably learn along the way that we may waste a lot of time and not spend time with the serious people. That's just my thought. That's all.
No, that's good. And honestly, for any of you too, if you are able to use questions in your forms, like for a webinar, for an ebook, the more you can learn about them, the more you can segment your database. And now you can talk to those audiences differently. We know at Jill Smith, if we know it's a little more serious, we don't just invite them to the next webinar. We'll hold an in-person event. Let's get them in person and get to know them in person versus, to your point, the curious, we'll send them links to more webinars and ebooks. But if they're serious about it, we'll invite them to the next in-person event that we have down the line.
But you never know when that curious person has a trigger event that becomes a serious person. So don't
Yep.
discount just because if they're curious, they woke up and something happened. So there's some trigger event.
Life-changing event.
Unfortunately, you can't always predict when that trigger event is.
It just
Timing
happened
is
to me.
everything.
I came into this as a curious person. Now I'm really serious. Thanks.
I won Frank over. All right.
Well, Matt, we are at time. I'll give you a chance. Any final thoughts? I know we didn't get to all of our questions today, and certainly we can extend this into another coffee break in the
Yeah,
future. But
I mean,
any kind of final takeaways on your end?
I guess that is the good teaser of, we shared a lot of tips on here that anyone can kind of refer back to. I think that the main thing is what I shared earlier. Document what that process is, or if you want, to know what ours looks like, reach out to myself, Carrie, our agency team. That's what we're here to help for. And obviously, if you have questions, you think of something later on today, reach out to us. We're here as a resource to all of you. We're all in this to get better together.
Well, thank you all for joining us today. Matt, thank you so much for being our guest barista. Have a great rest of your day, finish to your week. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for tuning in. This podcast was brought to you by C2P, an organization whose purpose is to educate, train, grow, and support holistic financial advisors so families can achieve true prosperity. Never miss an episode by subscribing now to discover new resources and strategies. Visit c2penterprises.com to learn how we can help scale and secure your business. At the time of delivery and any subsequent publishing, information was deemed reliable, but is subject to change by the time of listening or viewing. The contents of this piece include options and projections of C2P, are subject to change, and are for informational purposes only. The information provided in this presentation is not intended to be individual investment, tax, or legal advice.